Hi, welcome to another video from the CTAD Clinic. My name is Dr. Mike Lloyd and I'm the Clinic Director. In today's video I'm going to be looking at something called layering. Well, this is a process that we talk about in our clinical work with people with dissociative identity disorder and other specified dissociative disorders, DID and OSDD. What layering is a way of explaining how sometimes unexplained or unexpected feelings can suddenly be felt very, very powerfully at the surface, if you like. So whoever is at the front, whichever person or parts are at the front, there's a sudden intrusion of a great deal of emotional resonance, and that can create a lot of difficulty because it's often quite negative. And those are the ones we're looking at. This can also apply for positive emotions, but I guess that's quite easy to deal with and accept. The negative ones are a lot more difficult. And we use layering as a way of being able to try and explain and help people understand how this can happen and in what circumstances it takes place. And it just gives a bit of background, understanding, and leads towards resolution of these with a degree of minor intervention along the way. The key aspect of this is that we think of dissociation with DID and OSDD in terms of different layers. So however you want to visualize it, whatever kind of sort of like mechanism you want to take, we see it as being layers. There's layers on the surface, there's intermediate layers, and then there can be very deep layers. And often the very deep layers are those containing the traumatic memories, and those are ones that are most heavily dissociated out. Obviously, this is just a generalization and can apply differently for different people. So when we think of layering, it's looking at the impact that something can have on one part of the system on other parts of the system. So the way we are considering this is that an event might take place on the surface, i.e. whoever is at front, and there could be something going on which is of a stressful nature. We're not talking about the threatening type things, because when there is an actual threat, this is very different. It can be expected that there'll be a lot of distress, agitation and fear, but we're looking at the unexpected intrusion of those kind of emotions when really nothing is going on the surface, but there could be minor stress. So as an example, it could be that you've taken your car in for the MOT, the service check, as we have in the UK, and it's failed the MOT, and that means that you have to spend a bit of money and have to repair a few bits and pieces and get it sorted. Now, no one wants that to happen, no one likes that to happen. You can only hope you can afford it if it does happen, but it's a bit of a stressful thing to say that the car has failed its service test and needs a little remedial work being done. That can generate a bit of distress, a bit of an urgency and a sense of stress on the surface. And what can happen is that you can deal with it, right? You have this sort of expected management and you cope with the situation on the surface and you kind of shrug your shoulders and go, okay, I didn't enjoy that, it wasn't great, but no big deal, move on. And yet somehow there's this emergence of very, very powerful negative emotions, which can often be about fear and avoidance and can lead to dissociation within the system. And that can be quite unpleasant, and it can really derail the day, which didn't seem so bad, but has actually turned out quite bad in the end. The example I want to use of this is a thunderstorm, because that's a really good way of being able to try and explain it to a person as to where this might be coming from. So imagine that on the surface there is a rainstorm taking place from which there is some thunder, and the person or parts on the surface might be looking at this and going at the top layer, oh, this isn't very nice, it's really rainy, it might keep me awake if it's during the night, or I hope everything is okay, I hope the roof is all right, I hope we don't get wet, I hope there's no flood. But generally speaking, it's something to be looked at and marvelled if there's a bit of lightning, but the thunder can be a little bit unsettling to some. So that's fine, right? On the surface, thunderstorm taking place, not brilliant, but there we go. It's fine, it's manageable, we all know it's going to pass. That's our top layer, if you like, our surface layer. Something's going on, might not be all that great, but is essentially okay. Now, imagine this. On the intermediate layer, so let's say the middle layer of the system, they don't see the rain because they're sort of deeper down, but they hear the thunder. So they're going, okay, there is a thunderous noise going on. I don't know why. I can hear this rumbling, I can hear this noise, and I can feel from the surface that something is going on, but I don't know what it is because the layers are so low, right? They're dissociated out. They don't necessarily have co-consciousness, don't necessarily see what's going on the surface. They hear the thunder, they can feel a bit of agitation, feel a little bit of a stress, but they don't really know what's going on. Therefore, they're more likely at that intermediate layer to become quite agitated. something's happening and they don't know what's going on, but they can hear that there's noise, they can feel that something's happening, but they don't know what that is. So the essence of the rain has been kept at the top surface, but the sound of the thunder and what that means is being passed down into a lower layer, and that has a degree of impact, not serious, but a degree of impact. Now, with layering, I like to think that what can then happen is that agitation from hearing the thunder gets moved down into the deeper levels of the system, but without the sound of the thunder. All that goes down there are the emotions, because largely at the depth of the system, in the deepest layers, is where the emotional, the traumatic memory sits, so it's much more emotional. If you think that we've got sort of verbal and visual going on at the top layers, and we've got emotional going on the deeper layers. So the agitation from the intermediate layer gets passed down to the deeper layer, but they don't know there's thunder, they don't know there's rain, all they can hear and feel is agitation. Now, we know that the thunderstorm isn't necessarily a threat, and the surface layer knows it's not a threat, and even the intermediate layer may not know it's a threat, but it's perceived with a degree of agitation and distress, but the deeper layer is none the wiser. All it feels is that there is agitation and distress from somewhere up above, but they do not know anything about the context of which is taking place, because they are buried deep within the dissociative layers. So what gets through to them is the agitation and distress that tells that part of the system that there is a threat going on. What they feel is something is happening, they don't like it, it must be bad, and therefore a fear response comes out. And that fear response, because it's emotional, we know that emotions travel down through these layers much more than visuals, cognitive, intellectual stuff, they get stuck in they end in those middle layers. They don't go down to the bottom layers in the same way. So the emotion of fear, because there's a perception of threat at the lowest level of the system, that gets transmitted all the way to the top, and therefore the person or the part sitting at the top layer of the system experience this frantic fear response. And that's what can happen. So if we go back to the car being taken in for the service, you can take the car in for the service, it fails its service check. You have to buy a couple of new tires, or you have to sort of replace the brake lining, or check the oil and that sort of stuff. And then there can be this enormous fear response, and it can feel like it's completely out of the blue, totally out of context with the setting within which that difficult situation is occurring, and that can really cause a great deal of difficulty for everybody involved. There may be a dissociative event and nobody would understand why, and afterwards there may be amnesia and all this kind of thing, and afterwards looking back and thinking, I have no idea why that happened. I just took the car in for the MOT, it didn't fail, I paid for some new tyres, the new tyres got put on, it passed the MOT, all great. Why did I lose half a day to my dissociation? Why do I feel so tired? Why do I feel so out of sync with everything? Why am I carrying so much fear? Why is my heart beating so much? Why do I feel so agitated when nothing happened? And this can be a way of trying to explain, using layers, that what happens at the top gets transmitted to the middle without all context, and then gets transmitted to the lowest layers without any context, and therefore the emotional response gets heard and gets passed all the way to the surface. So that's a way. It's not going to be all encompassing, but it's a way of being able to understand that situation. In order to know what to do about it, comes back to the usual things. It's about reassurance and understanding that if you think something mildly stressful is happening on the surface, you can probably predict that your degree of stress is going to get passed down through those layers, bit by bit by bit, and end up having some sort of big negative effect that is out of sync with the context of the initial stressful situation. So therefore, don't just transmit that negative energy, if you like, down through the system, transmit reassurance. So say, wow, something's happening on the surface, my car has failed its service, I'm a bit stressed about that, I know I'm okay, but I'm going to make sure that I send the reassuring message that everything is okay down through those layers, so that as the emotion of stress is passed down through those layers, then it comes with it a sense of reassurance that all is okay. So while emotion is going down through the layers, calm reassurance, and everything is okay, goes down through those layers. So imagine at the very depth of that system, the emotional parts are picking up on the stress, picking up on the agitation, seeing it as a fear response, beginning to develop a traumatic fear fight-flight type response. And then suddenly reassurance comes in, which says, I know you might be feeling this, but look, take my word for it. We've got this covered. It's all going to be okay. That can actually solve the emotional response at the depth of the system, which means that the fear does not then get transmitted back up to the top, which can mean for a more productive and happy day. So that's what layering is all about. So we talk about this in our clinical practice. It might be something that you can think about. It doesn't necessarily lead to any intervention whatsoever. It's simply a way of trying to make sense of why an emotion can suddenly arrive at the top layer with no context, no understanding, as if from nowhere. We know it's not coming from nowhere. It's likely coming from the lowest levels of this system, but there is a break in the communication of context throughout that system. So I hope this has been a useful video for you. I'm really interested, as always, to read the comments and have a little look through. This might be something that you could discuss with your therapist. If you're a therapist, this might be something that you can work through with your clients. It's simply a nice way of being able to develop the understanding of why emotions arrive in the way that they do. It's not going to be the answer. It's simply a helpful way of trying to arrive at a possible answer. So I hope this has been helpful. Like, subscribe, share, do all the usual stuff, and I'll see you next time. And between now and then, please do take great care.